Thank you for joining the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston for our weekly online ministers forum. I'm the Reverend D. Scott Cooper, Assistant Minister of Congregational Life, filling in for Dr. Bosson, who is away this week. These programs are conversations with community organizers, artists, scholars, religious leaders, and others about how we can collectively address the present crises. Their purpose is to offer members of our community and all who wish to join us online science-based resources and liberation-oriented inspiration to get through these difficult times. Today, I'm joined by Conrad Hamric. We will be talking about helping children and adolescents make it through the pandemic. A licensed clinical social worker and licensed marriage and family therapist, Conrad has been providing services in the mental health community in hospitals and private practice since 1992. And, full disclosure, besides being a busy and talented therapist, Conrad is my husband. For those of you who are with us for the first time, let me say a few words about Unitarian Universalism. We are a religious tradition that celebrates the possibility of goodness within each human heart, and the transformative power of love and the clarifying force of reason. We believe that we do not think alike to love alike. We hope that you find these forums a source of connection, hope, and clarity. Conrad, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, sure. Before we talk about helping children and adolescents during the pandemic, you have many African American clients, and I don't think people really appreciate how hard this pandemic has hit people of color. So if you would briefly describe in general terms, of course, the effects the coronavirus has had on people who have talked to you.
A lot of my patients have been forced to either work in high-risk job situations or return to a high-risk job situation after they either, because of the fact that the COVID had multiple outbreaks in the workplace, and I've also had patients be forced to go back into a nursing home even though they were still experiencing symptoms because maybe they were a nurse's aide or a primary tech in a nursing home. Also, I've had patients who are working at a grocery store and they had to go back because after they were sick because they were a frontline worker. I've had employees who are in warehouses and also people who were doing working and delivering like food trucks and things like that. And they could be exposed to the COVID virus, but because they were an essential worker, their employer was not allowing for paid time off. Or if they are in a call center and they're required to take calls or do sales, they're having to be indoors because the company might not allow them to have access to credit card or employee or patient information. Also, a lot of the families have had their adult children lose jobs and move home. So then you've got multiple family members either trying to work remote or trying to manage with grandchildren or extra family members in the homes.
Yeah, I was going to ask, sometimes even if people were able to safely go back to work, sometimes people just simply couldn't get childcare.
Right. I have a patient, and she has a 3-year-old, very active little boy, and she said for her to manage, and right now she's only working half days, she has to lock herself in her room, and sometimes she's a single parent, and he's just beating on the door or throwing tantrums, which is very difficult to try to do remote working even half days for her because of no childcare and also that she's a single parent.
Wow. That's just amazing. And I know also many of the people you've talked to have had close family members and multiple close family members affected by, if not die from the coronavirus.
Yes, I would say every week the number of deaths increases, as do the calls with patients having multiple family members or multiple friends who are sick, some of which are also in the hospital. I've had multiple adults whose parents got sick in a nursing home, and then obviously they're not able to go visit them or talk to them. And I've had multiple patients this week call with, I've got my son-in-law, my daughter, my grandbaby is sick, where do you recommend they go for treatment? One of the other concerns that I'm noticing with some of my black patients is they seem to be getting substandard care. And what I mean by that is they might go to 2 or 3 facilities before they're get in emergency rooms, sometimes without getting appropriate care. And I just recently had a patient who was discharged from a hospital without them doing the protocol, which is 2 negative tests. And they were sent home, and he was not given the option for in-home physical therapy and some other oxygen therapy, which is what's happening with my other patients. That was not offered to this gentleman who actually has insurance.
Wow. Well, I know many people think the lack of good care also has played into how hard people have contracted the virus because of having poor health care prior to this going around as well.
That and certainly still here, access to testing. I've been very fortunate this week that a patient told me about a testing site that's in South Dallas that patients can go to and be tested for free. All they had to show was a work badge that showed they were an essential worker. But my patients, that a nurse who works at Parkland here, and she got infected from a coworker, and so her husband is high risk, and they waited 4 hours to get tested here. But they do have insurance, and she was given preferential treatment because they said she was an essential worker. She's a nurse.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, well, thank you. Before we start talking about helping adolescents and children, I wanted to touch on the fact that anyone who thinks that this is not a real and a serious issue, you have firsthand experience with how real and how serious it is, and how much harder it's hitting people of color than it is the rest of the population. And I wanted to make that very clear, so thank you. So we'll go on. Children and adolescents typically display certain common fears at each age as they mature. But I imagine that children witnessing the uncertainty in the world right now might have a whole host of other fears and anxieties. Can you talk about that some?
Sure. I think children whose parents or loved ones or maybe even grandparents are living with them are seeing this global pandemic, and they're worrying about, what is it going to do to my school? Or is it going to hurt grandpa? Or for some kids, it's also my mom or dad is sick, or my sibling is sick. And those are my current patients experiencing those kinds of things. Also, they've had a huge change in their normal routine and daily routine. Often for the spring, they weren't allowed to go to school. They're not allowed to see their friends. They're also, sometimes depending on where they live, not allowed to go outside. Depending on the parents' level of anxiety, the parents are more on edge, and they, as a result, might be more overprotective and not even allowing them to go outside and play. It just depends on the level of fear that the parent is experiencing, or maybe what the environment they're living in. And also hearing about the parents talk about deaths, family members, loved ones, friends that are sick, and watching the parent be alarmed or worried as the case numbers rise, or their friends and family members, or they find out they themselves have been exposed to the virus.
Wow. So do you see how do kids at different ages, is there a significant difference in how they're able to handle it, or the type of worries this causes with them?
There is, and one of those is typically with ages from about a year through about 7 or 8. There's a lot of separation fears. That these are just normal fears for the ages. Also, then you have kids on the young side, fear of the dark, fear of animals, fear of large objects, loud noises, and strangers. As they age, then those fears continue into fear of masks, fears of noises at night. Also, then they become aware of bodily harm, or they also become fearful of bad people. And then as they get into the 7-year-old range, then it becomes the typical fears, thunder and lightning, supernatural beings, sleeping or staying alone, and also sometimes if they watch something like a scary show or something like that, then that can relate into worry as well. And then the 9 years old through 15, it can be school-related, tests, school performance, physical appearance, death, also family and home issues, political concerns, preparation for the future, personal appearance, and school and social relationships as well, or fears. typical fears. Now, I want to also mention if you're worried about your kids' anxiety and wondering what that would look like just because of COVID, you might see an increase in worry. You might see increased aggression, tantrums, more restlessness, fidgeting, also decreased attention and concentration. They might be talking about fears, and that might turn into being angry at you or a loved one or even a toy, causing sleep problems, changes in eating habits. The kids might have stomach aches or headaches, and they might also be provoking or easily tearful or causing and provoking their siblings or if they're around friends. Those are things that would indicate that your child is anxious or they're having those increased anxiety probably because of COVID.
You mentioned some kids watching programs on TV and that causing fear. I can only imagine kids who catch some of this going on the news. Is it just best to not have them watch any of that and try and explain it to them on their level and try and keep them away from that?
Right. I think it's a little easier. Well, teenagers are harder to control the media, and my teenage patients have talked about being overwhelmed and almost having some post-traumatic symptoms because there was so much bad, and sometimes they're showing, patients are telling me they're showing very sick COVID patients on YouTube, and that's very unsettling to them. So yes, I think as a rule, either being mindful of what they're watching and limiting that, particularly based on your own child's level of sensitivity and maybe already being anxiously prone to start with. The other thing for bed is we definitely recommend turning that off for at least an hour before and trying to, and also to be mindful that they may need some kind of, if it's really bad, they may need some kind of herbal supplement, say valerian root, GABA, also melatonin. They make a lot of those in a chewable kid version, but something like that can be helpful if they cannot sleep.
Those sound like all really good suggestions. Well, as we've just been saying, many families are experiencing a lot of stress right now. And some of that's because they're all in the same place all day long, and they're not used to doing that. They're together all day without a break in the apartment or house, because some parents are working from home. Kids were doing school virtually, so at least they would be somewhat occupied for part of the day, but now summer's here, and that may not be the case, and they're looking for something to do. So you've given us a wealth of resources, and we've put links to some New York Times articles that you have recommended in the comment section for viewers to access. One cites the statistic that 46% of parents with children under 18 said their stress level was high, compared with 28% of adults without children. So the article is about parental burnout and how to make it through the summer. So parents are watching this. Please give them some advice about how to survive the summer.
Well, I think it's really essential, particularly the younger your children are, is to have a schedule or a routine. And also, you might even want to post that. One of the things that's been effective also is having time you're alternating inside and outside time, or inside time and playtime. Something that allows them to have a break and also just varied. But when I worked in a children's residential facility, when I first started, when I was 19, we had a posted daily schedule. It might include board games or card games or drawing, or times where you were writing letters to friends, parents, grandparents, and you were doing that and putting those in a box, or in that time we were actually putting them in the mail. So those would be other activities that parents could do with the kids during the day. It's also very helpful to try and focus on like positive attitudes, what you see your kids doing right, as well as parents acknowledging these are the strengths or these are the gifts that I see in you. Tell me some other positive things that maybe you're feeling or that you're noticing. Families can do that as a shared task. Also, focus on things that you can control. You can certainly control, little kids and you, washing your hands, wearing a mask if you go out, and also when you go to sleep, if you set a set bedtime, trying to go to sleep, maintain that, and also you can limit and control, again, media and access to things that would be causing increased fears. I think it's helpful, and this is something we do at church. We'll ask kids, tell me the best part and the worst part of your day, or the highs and lows of your day, depending on the age of the kid. Families can, again, do that as a dinner discussion or maybe before bed. And also trying to stay connected with loved ones through FaceTime, teleconference, and friends. I know parents that have little kids are letting their friends, letting the children either FaceTime or talk to their friends on either, if they have access, FaceTime or Zoom, or just on the phone, just try to stay in touch because they're apart and they haven't been able to be together. It's also really helpful to model for kids, like and just sort of share your own I'm anxious or I'm afraid, whatever that is, being authentic with your kids. And you might even talk about, well, when Daddy is scared, he might try to breathe deep. Let me show you. We're going to breathe in 4 and count, and then exhale to 6, and that's more of a belly breath. You might also encourage the kids to, and parents do this as well, pay attention to what's in your house, what's in your room. You try to center yourself by thinking, oh, it smells good, or there in the room, and this is my house now, there are flowers, there's a scented candle, it's sunshine outside. These are the things that I noticed, and sort of focus in on where you are and trying to ground themselves. Also, as adults and as kids, we can talk back to the worries. We can say, I'm feeling scared and I can handle this. Or I have the strength and the ability to calm myself down, and these are the things, this is my coping plan, this is what I'm going to do to calm myself down. Also, I think it's really important to recognize that we're all uncomfortable and with maybe the shared space, and making sure that parents have at least probably an hour before bed or just some alone me time that doesn't have the kids. I think if there's not that ability to just shut the door and tell the kids you need to be in your room and you need to read or whatever, and because it's mom time, dad time, or mommy and daddy time, and doing that daily so that you at least have some structured time, and again, it's just part of your routine. I know a lot of people say, how do I listen and talk to my kids? Well, one of them is tell me what you're feeling, or I would even go so far as to talk about what you notice. I notice you're having a hard time sleeping. I notice that you don't want to be away from me. I notice when you get scared when the dog barks. And just talk about the behavior and say, are you anxious? Or tell me what you're afraid of. Those would be conversations. And you could have that with your spouse as well and just talk about the things that you notice. And I think also, if it gets to a point where it feels like everybody is too fatigued or too afraid or is getting on edge and so irritable, again, there's always herbal options and remedies. There's also, you can always talk to a counselor, and these websites have great information as well that they can resource for ideas. There's virtual museum tours, and there's also great child books that we've referenced and hopefully will be shared with you about children who are trapped inside and how they're coping through classic stories and children's stories as well.
Those are all fabulous recommendations. So obviously you're saying a parent shouldn't try to pretend like they're strong and have no fears and everything's going to be okay with something like this, because that's really not what's going on, and kids can probably see through that.
Correct. I think the more you normalize it, and you also talk about maybe times that you have been scared or that you were afraid and how you got through it. You can tell. It's a great example of ability to tell a story. This helped me. It helped me when I was driving and I was on a bridge and maybe I was afraid of height and I called a friend, or I sang a song backwards. I counted backwards, I'm sorry. Or I sang a song like the Happy Birthday song, or something that I had memorized that I could sing out loud to sort of soothe myself.
You also referred to some great activities, virtual museum tours and things online. I think the internet may be quite a help right now if you can find some of those great things to do with the kids.
Right, and some of those we shared through the New York Times articles. They had some really nice ideas with them as well. options of books and virtual tours, even of famous places, and obviously museums and concerts, other things that are all available for free on YouTube.
That's great. And like I said, we're putting those links in the comment section of this. So if you'd like to take advantage of those, please look there. And also, a colleague I noticed shared with you a list of anxiety resources and websites. You sent me a PDF of that, and I wanted to offer, if anyone would like that, a copy of that, to email us at info@firstuuhouston.org, and we'll send you that PDF. It's got a long list of helpful resources to deal with anxiety and stress during all of this. So we're getting not too far from the end. I wanted to ask you, I know a colleague shared 2 lists with you that were written by Dr. Kristen Ohlenforst, and I was hoping you'd talk about, there's 6 tips for parents on the sheet, and as well as 5 messages for children on the list. If you could talk about those for a few minutes.
Sure. For parents, the specific recommendations are to conserve your energy. I think that goes back to the analogy of it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you want to be careful about managing the media and also, or anything else that could be stimulating or overstimulating yourself and the kids. Focus on facts, such as, for most people, these are symptoms. The symptoms are mild, and if you need something else, we will get you to see a doctor. And some worries are helpful. You might talk about that we are going to social distance and show what that means. Parents could do that with a hula hoop, or they could do it with a yardstick, or something that gives a visual example of what social distancing looks like. And also, if you have a COVID person, in your family that's sick, there's a whole other list of precautions of wearing the mask inside, or also trying to have meals outside or separated, and other COVID responses. Also, it's very important to try to schedule the day, which I mentioned earlier, and include safety, predictability, and things to look forward to. Sometimes you would have maybe nights that are movie nights, or nights where the kids get to pick what's for dinner or the meal, or even help you cook. Those would be other things. Or maybe you're celebrating something such as a relative or friend's birthday, and you're going to make a gift for them, or someone's going to be having a birthday and you're going to create a card, things like that. And mindfulness, which I mentioned a while ago, this is for parents, living in the present, trying to focus on the fact of today, we're all healthy, and these are the blessings, or these are the things that we can be thankful and grateful for. With kids, we talked about saying to the kids, I see you, I hear you, I understand that you are afraid or can't sleep or worried about, and just sort of mention that to the kids. And also, you can go so far as to describe, many are sick, and some of them have to stay home to feel better and to not spread the virus. We stay home so that we keep space from other people, and also we wear a mask if we leave, we always wash our hands if we are out or we're touching things that could get us to be sick. You might mention to kids sometimes, I see you're asking a lot of questions, and some of these I can answer, and I will try to find answers for things if I don't know what they are. But tell me what you want to know or about this, and I'll try to get more information if I don't know the answer. Some people, and I mentioned this, that they said they might be, I know you're worried about your grandparents. He's okay, he's safe, and he's staying healthy because he's staying in his house. We will Zoom call him, or we will FaceTime him, or we will call him on the phone so you can have a conversation and let him know that you miss him and how much you love them. And if you get to a point and you say, I know that you're sad because you've lost things, and you can't see your friends, or maybe you can't go to the birthday party, but I'm also sad and disappointed because maybe you didn't get to have the end of school field day, or maybe you didn't get to have this choir concert, or you didn't get to be in your play. And I too was very sad and disappointed because we as a family are grieving and missing the activities and the things that we looked forward to doing at your school, or maybe even at church or outside, that maybe we're not allowed to do right now.
That is all such great information. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us. I so appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us over this last half hour, and thank you so much. And I think people are really going to get some value and use out of this. And like I said, we've got lots of links there for people who are interested in the comments section. So thank you, Conrad.
You bet. Thank you very much, and y'all take care and stay safe.
Thanks. If you found this video to be helpful, please consider joining us for our weekly worship service. It's posted online each Sunday at 10:30 a.m. and features music and prayers in addition to a sermon, and I will be preaching this Sunday. Thank you to our staff for making this video possible. It was produced by Christian Holmes. Alma Vizcara assisted with the editing. We will see you all online soon and in person as soon as it is possible for us to gather again. And please remember that no matter how isolated you feel, we are all in this together.